Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first session of Reflexive Architecture, post 7 Continua for post-digital by our instructors Neil Spiller and Derek Hayes. I'll, I'm going to pass on the mic to Derek.
Okay. So thanks for joining again. And as we said yesterday, we split the introduction into two parts. I think Neil's introduction was probably all you really needed, but this one, I think, gets into the technological way of thinking about the workshop. There was a question just before everybody arrived about the absence of core reading texts within the seminar, within the workshop, and that's because I think we want to frame this as a workshop and identify perhaps individual texts that support the direction of your individual project work, rather than focus on a set of core texts in this, and also to focus rather on specific technologies or pieces of software in particular. And there might be core text for that, but they'll be peculiar to those systems. So there might be technical manuals or international standards that apply, and so on. So we can identify those as we go, I think. And the same for texts that you might want to read around the directions that you take, as I've said, in your project work. So the presentation today is broadly in three elements or components. The first one is a short series of slides that build on the work Neil presented yesterday, and start to frame an approach to the way we might think about working with the software practically. The second element of the workshop today is more discussion around your own experience with software, what you might want to get out of the software itself practically, and in the limited time that we have together to do that. And lastly, I want to run through, I think, two or three of the environments, the software environments that we might be working with, that I think we could be working with in the workshop, the practical demonstration side of things. And that really is by way of introducing the second of the parallel strands that Neil and I have arranged for you. After the session today, we'll be running in two parts, a presentation from Neil and then demonstrations from me. So it will follow broadly the format that we've done over the last couple of days, but in a much more condensed time frame, in just the 2.5 hours for each session. And we can talk about what that might mean in terms of the work you might want to look at independently, or ways in which we might identify resources to support that kind of engagement with the software itself, or ways in which you can reach out to me outside of the seminar program, in the space that we have between seminars and so on. So I'll just start with sharing a few slides with you. As I said, they build on the direction and that sort of lineage of visionary work that Neil presented to you yesterday, but start to give I suppose a philosophical framework within which you might approach that work as well, and that same framework as it might apply to our consideration of the software. So I'll just share now. Okay, can you all see that screen? Yeah, it's a bit grey, but it's a bit like that here. So I want to, I suppose, give some kind of technological, philosophical, a techno-philosophical framework for the next few weeks. And give you something that might be shared in the discussion. I mean, you all demonstrated to us the range of interests that you have. It's all very diverse from the beginning, as you might expect, but there will be something that we might all want to look at, resisting that sense of it being a seminar readings based material, but there still might be some shared or common philosophical frameworks that we might want to engage in collectively. So that's what this starts to articulate. Again, trying to just run through this in three ways, trying really to tie and make sense of the idea that we can talk about drawing through software, drawing through code, drawing through diagramming and coding. And that to some can be kind of quite opaque as an idea. And in some ways, the conversations I've had with Neil over the years start to, how's the best way to describe it? I mean, he's not antagonistic to the technological, but he's not an advanced user of the computer either. So there's a very clear distinction between the two of us in that respect, in terms of our engagement with architecture or with teaching more broadly or academia more broadly. In all of my work has been working with different design students engaged in media practices of some kind. And as I started to say yesterday, that took me away from architecture quite radically up until perhaps 10 years ago when I returned to teach in a school of architecture. This is how I suppose I'd begin to say we might recover and reinvent the thinking of drawing after the industrialization of geometry through computer-aided design, through more recently, and I apologize, and we can open up this for discussion for those of you who are not coming at this straightforwardly from an architectural context. But computer-aided design, you might have come across this term more than that of building information modeling, which is a much more I'd say semantically declared way of describing architectural production and procedural modeling systems. So how the algorithmic has started to become more pervasive in discourse of architecture and the practice of architecture. So we'll try to unpack this, and I'm curious about some of the ways in which those of you that have come to the workshop from there was at least one that had come from a kind of critical code perspective, and I'm keen to kind of open up that line of conversation. So I've tried to think of this in three ways. The first is this idea of reflexivity and techniques. So the shift from feedback to individuation, and I think there was at least one of us in the workshop that was beginning to talk about that sense of mediation and a technical milieu within which architecture is constructed. The second is linked to the optical and the non-retinal, I suppose, the ways in which the computational apparatus is beginning to reshape inscription and representation. And the third, and it's one that I think is very visible certainly in three-dimensional software, in the digital content tools and in the games tools, is this excuse me, relation between scenography and space and software, and how particularly today, I'd say, the scenographic is becoming increasingly diagrammed intelligently and spatially through artificial intelligence. And I don't know how much we want to get into that kind of discussion in the workshop. I obviously come from a very much a sort of 20th century kind of frame, as does Neil. But I have engaged in the developments of AI. I was recently on a large innovation accelerator program, and I've invited into the discussion in a workshop later, about midway through, from someone that can very specifically talk to you about the whole integrations that are hurtling towards creative practitioners and ways in which we might open that up to you. So I will be interested to hear about that later. Moving on. So if we think about reflexivity in architecture, or the idea of reflexive architecture emerging, where technology and thought through drawing turns back on itself, then I think we've got these
I think we have some difficulties. Yeah, it's connection. Just wait. Derek is having some power issues. He'll be back in he's rebooting his system and he'll be back in 5 minutes. So in the meantime, you guys can have a good conversation. So.
Sorry about that. That was a power cut. I'm sure this seminar is cursed. Last 2 times my body tried to kill me, and now because it's the witchy day, spooky day, there's power cuts. Right. Let's. I'll just try and collect my thoughts. Carry on. Sorry about that. Right. Should it happen again? I mean, I'll take a lead from the new centre on this, but I think my preference, if I do get another power cut, would be to call it a day and reschedule this, rather than keep running up and down the stairs to find out why the power keeps going out. But let's assume it's not going to. Is everybody with me? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So these 5 frames under the heading of field here. So these are by way of those, I suppose, readings without providing any specific readings. They're very broad
Can't
brush.
hear you, I think.
Hello? Hello, did someone ask a question then? No? Okay. So the first is Simondon. The second is I suppose, a broader process philosophical position, and a colleague of mine, Spencer Roberts, hopefully will be with us in one of the sessions to talk about processuality in relation to the Internet of Things and physical computing. So that's a sort of Bergsonian and Whiteheadian frame for the readings. And then, as Neil intimated yesterday, the cybernetics is a strong current, let's say, in certainly in his work, and in much of the work that he was presenting. And here, the key figures, I think, for us will be Gordon Pask and Ranulph Glanville, mostly because of their the ways in which they engaged with architectural education as cyberneticians, and the influence that has had on 2 of the UK schools in particular, the AA and at the Bartlett. So there's obviously a lot of reading around cybernetics, and in particular the second order of cybernetics, of which Pask is a key proponent. And here, that idea of conversation and the communicative exchange that is central to the idea of reflexivity as we're framing it, and the cybernetic sense in which Neil deploys and understands his relation between himself and his drawings. And then there's an ethological position, and this is obviously very shorthand way of describing the core idea, but that idea of capacities and affects and the ecological line that runs through some of this discourse is in the mix. So if people would like specific texts that we would use to frame this, I'd be happy to provide some. As Lena heard me in the discussion before we opened the seminar, I want to resist the idea that these become sort of foundational texts to the workshop, but they're clearly of some significance. You know, they have been to my thinking, and they are in some ways to the ways in which we can talk about and develop the seven continua as Neil as first proposed in the early 2000s, and a core philosophical I guess question is how we might update those for where we are today. So that's by way of a sort of apology for not providing any core reading, but at the same time insisting that there might be some. So if people would like, I mean, all you've got to do is ask me to provide that material if you want some as an individual, let's say, rather than as a core insisted upon set of readings. And I'm not going to spend long here because this is really getting into Neil's territory. And I suppose this is more watch out for works that come by way of precedent in the presentation. So there is Cedric Price and Littlewood, sort of relating to the dramaturgical, let's say, the scenographic line of thinking that I'm hoping to get through today. The Fun Palace, Gordon Pask, and his work, The Colloquy of Mobiles, at the Cybernetic Serendipity exhibition at the ICA in London in 1968. Somewhere in all of this is Negroponte's the soft architecture machines work. I would downplay that, and I certainly don't think it figures too significantly in Neil's work. And then right back at the very beginning of all of this for me, Neil's Digital Dreams from 1998. So as a summary, the post-digital architecture does not mean after digital. But when the digital is no longer a novelty or a tool, but a substrate, I think that's a way that I would describe it. The best reading that I would recommend, but not recommend as reading in this resisting giving readings, is by the musician Kim Cascone, who I've been fortunate to work with on a number of occasions. A sound artist, I would say, and a musician. So he wrote a very short essay on the post-digital quite a long time ago. And I suppose what we're what we're generally interested in setting a project about bridging and thinking about drawing is I guess, a counter movement to the adoption of CAD, BIM, and those generative and parametric systems that I opened with today. But this sort of mechanization of line work into vectors, this sort of formalization of geometry into schemas that occurs in the information modeling. Actually, building information modeling and building information management are kind of synonymous terms. The M has got this sort of fluidity. And then the generative and parametric systems that are abstracted into algorithmic construction of form. And I think if you want to think about what we're doing in the workshop as a kind of straw manning of the position of Patrick Schumacher, and the whole politics of parametricism, then that wouldn't be a bad way for you to be, again, sort of framing the discussion and the workshop with readings that we're not setting, or with a kind of purpose to the readings that we're not setting. And I think it's telling that you could say that Neil and Patrick Schumacher have been developing their approaches to thinking about these impacts in architecture in parallel and in very different ways, and with very different consequences. So that's another way that we might think non-representationally about the workshop activity. The thinking of architecture through its own tools on itself, which is that second order cybernetic idea of observation. And then we've also got this I guess another sort of, I mean, I'm loath to use the word lineage, but I think it's sometimes useful, and also these sort of griddings of this here aren't always helpful, or I find them always quite difficult. And maybe it's actually the attraction to them that makes me sort of draw against them. But there are, or we could think of there being, a series of epochs through which this optical geometric idea has kind of moved and shifted, from the Renaissance and the origin of perspective through orthographic projection into axonometry and mechanical drawing, through the representation of cameras and optics and the rasterization of images in a digital, and then through into the post-digital in this sort of reflexive, inscriptive way that we might rethink the system of writing with light and drawing with light that we might bring out from photography. So each stage of this has transformed certainly the idea of what a drawing is, or what a drawing could do, or what a drawing was for, how space was imagined and constructed, how space was encoded, how a camera has rendered it, and through drawing and thinking through this our own capacities, how the reflexivity of drawing as it opens us to a kind of reflexivity of our own conditions. These, I think, might not be references of Neil's, but I think these are interesting texts. So Philip Steadman's two books, one very recently on a kind of heretical idea that was explored by David Hockney in a provocative thesis that the old masters, painters, use optical aids. And Stedman's done these two fantastic studies, one on Vermeer and another on Canaletto. And I think again, I'm not going to insist that you run out and have a good read of these, but I think they are in the background to all of this, and for the reasons that I think Neil kind of, if you didn't make it clear, certainly alluded to this idea that somehow the author of the Hypnotomasia Polyphily might have been Alberti, and through that how the woodcuts that illustrate that text are constructed with this idea of perspective. So you've got this sort of garden being constructed mysteriously by Alberti's drawing devices, and I kind of enjoy the idea that might be kind of real in some sort of way, but of course it's refuted. So just a few images to supplement those that Neil went through yesterday. This is from the, I think, 14th century Book of Ingenious Devices. I think an Islamic text, which is full of descriptions, diagrams of mechanical devices, what we might think of in that context as being marvelous devices, I suppose. But they also figure, if cybernetics is this relation between control, man and machine, and the animal, then they start to, really early, you get this sort of folding back of ideas that you see in these texts. So this is a donkey and a sort of pump, sort of water machine. And the Hypnotomasia Polyphily is filled with watery devices. This is another image from that same text, and I've included it here just because of the elephant with the obelisk on its back in the Hypnotomasia Polyphily, and the elephant in Castle. If anyone's been or knows that part of London, is also named after that same bit of sculpture. So this is a clock tower on top of an elephant. this is obviously the kind of perspective hinge, as is this. This is from the Dürer, the book that Neil was showing you illustrations from yesterday. So I think we can come back to that at some point, but the idea that there might be parallels that we can draw between sort of modes of drawing and any kind of equivalence that we might find. And I think that that way of thinking about software that begins to be uncovered by Lev Manovich, another unprovided text that might support, so the software takes command is the book that you might want to look at, that starts to look at the software interface and starts to take apart, dissects the interface for Adobe After Effects. The other thing I think I mentioned yesterday was the ways in which we might think of the Hypnotomasia Polyphily, this text that we've given you as a starting point for everything that we're talking about, is this relation between theatre and software. It's not a new idea. This is Brenda Laurel, in the early days of this. I'm talking multimedia before the internet was at all widespread and everything multimedia had to sit on a CD. But the idea that the computer was a theatre. And we'll talk, by looking at some software in just a few minutes, about ways in which the idea of the scene graph has this sort of parallel of nodes as actors, and the idea of the scene and the stage is very commonly found in interactive media. Has been in the production sense since probably since Macromedia Director, which was the first interactive authoring tool that I encountered, but is still very much present in the software that we'll look at today, in Houdini, in Unity, and in all of them you'll find this scene-based hierarchy, stages and scenography. These ideas relate across back into that text, and as that text also influences the history and development of theatre itself. Anyway, I think that's all I wanted to talk about there. So we'll stop that and just have time for a little bit of reflection before I open a piece of software up for you. Could we get any responses, please? Anyone at all got any?
As in, like, ideas that pop to mind, or like...
Yeah, of course, conversationally, what's been springing to your mind whilst I've been talking, or even in the blackout? Must have been thinking about something then.
Like, actually, I'm not sure if it's completely the same thing, but it popped. Like, today I was looking at work from Jean-Luc Moulin. I think that's how to pronounce. I had already come in contact with that work, but now, like, like the image popped again into mind, like the I don't know how to explain this, but there was like how do I explain an artwork like in it's like this transparent sculpture, like this globe, but like it came into itself, and like with a like a hand drawing inside, like drawing, not drawing. I don't know if it was clear. And I don't know. It's like in some way, like I don't know if it's the kind of same reflexive in that we're talking about, but in the it reminded me like of like the a certain movement. I can share the picture if I don't know if it will be helpful
I
or not.
think I mean there's a Discord channel, isn't there? So I think we can probably follow up those sorts of visual sharing there. I think would be good to be able to do that with some work as well as the work that Neil's showing you. I think it would be good.
And Andre just uh, shared something on the chat. I like text about it. Like the one I read actually, it was like 2 months ago, which was the one like the protocol of something by Reza. Yeah. Um, wait,
The poet engineer.
I
Yeah.
I might find the how do I share it? So um
I think in the chat is the simple one.
okay. That makes sense as well.
So this came from a seminar with Reza, yeah?
Uh, the thing that was sharing in the
Yeah.
okay.
No, I'm not sure actually.
Oh.
I just know about the text. I think it's I mean I have the reader. I think it was developed through an exhibition while he was working closely.
So I'm gonna share this Instagram post in which where I found it. Like
I think the idea of the poet engineer probably does sum up much of this in a way. So I mean, this interlude before I just work through the software tool. I don't know whether everyone's had a chance to download the software that I'd recommended. Have you all been able to do that? That would be good. But I mean, could I follow up on the brief bios we asked you all to do yesterday with some sense of your, I guess, attitude in relation to working with software? You know, what is it that brings you to that kind of workshop aspect of the program? And what's the I mean, I'm not suggesting we run a skills audit or anything of that kind of nature, but is there a sense that we can, you know, you could help me understand where you're coming from in relation to that sort of practical drive to engage with the software practically? I don't know who wants to start that conversation. But I would like to take some more notes on that. I think it will help me. It'll help me to help you with that side of things. Is there anyone?
I can tell.
Okay.
Uh, about software,
Hmm.
I'm not sure. Actually, because like at least from my experience with like with programs, or I don't think I've ever been used it in such a way. Maybe it was always kind of regretted. I don't know if that's the word, but like in a linear way. Was never kind of because like in another by another point, like the way I usually do stuff or think, like in drawing or in like in or create anything overall, it's kind of really just by throwing myself actually, and like I throw myself and then just kind of see what comes, and like I kind of try to relate to it, and like it's really intuitive, and like and a lot of what pops into mind, and
Yeah. So it sounds
whatever.
like you like a kind of improvisational
Yes, I
way
forgot that
of
word. I
work.
could have just used that word. Yeah, I could have
Yeah.
just said that.
Yeah. No, that's good. So I mean, I used to I mean, I haven't for some time, but that idea that you need some kind of virtuosity in order to improvise is a peculiar one to software that doesn't exist, that kind of doesn't exist outside of it. It's not kind of the same as becoming, you know, a virtuoso pianist or something. And it's not the kind of gestural improvisation that you're describing, or you kind of starting to articulate about your drawing.
Mm.
There's something else that sort of sits between the poet and the engineer in that to just sort of riff off that text that has just been shared. So I mean, if we were to, I mean, Neil, I think mostly uses Photoshop. You know, I don't think he's you know is I don't think he's you know, he's not using the software tools that are most strongly associated with the reflexive architectural idea as something that might be constructed. Yeah. So I think that I've always thought that's a kind of interesting thing about his drawings, that he's engaging with the software system, the kind of assemblage of systems for cybernetic, cyberspatial, reflexive work, but he's doing this with the simplest of means, right? And that I've always found that sort of fascinating, because all of my work has been helping students engage at a practical level with, you know, with you know, trying to come to terms with programming or something like this in relation to some huge piece of animation software or something. So I think that's obviously here in the workshop, is this proximity to working with something that's got this vast tool set, um, 3, 4, 5 different environments within which you might construct works very differently, which we'll come to, and I think um, that what we can hope to do is to get a sense of how those systems kind of are integrated in these different environments as kind of possible worlds, and um, how they become commensurable in some kind of way for data or ideas or entities to be exchanged between them, we can step away from these, and it will help us visualize or this material, and then engage with it through whatever drawing means we can do. So I'm curious about how far any one of you might want to get into the use of the software, and how much of it is about this sort of awareness of how it kind of fits together, you know. So sorry, I know that's a big question. That's probably a question that's being asked of the room rather than of you as an individual. But it is
No,
also
but
being asked of you as an individual, you know. So
yeah, no, but like as I forgot what uh like for the question of how far would it to like even though I have no experience or like in doing it that way, like it will be like as far or like as experimental as possible, maybe.
yeah,
And
good.
just-
Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you for that. Lena, I think you're next in my list on the screen. So have you got
Yeah, so I think I'm most familiar with something like Microsoft Paint, and everything beyond that has always struck me as offering a bit, while I looked at it naively, as tools that offer a bit too much possibility, both in that there are so many different types of software and environment, and then within them, I'm just hit with what looks like endless possibility, but they're not possibilities to me because I don't know how to employ them. So I've always been a bit scared of this kind of software rendering and even Photoshop. But then in my sort of readings, there's this figure that has emerged, for example, the poet engineer, or in Simondon's text as well, of a kind of person who's a technologist, but also a thinker, and approaches techniques not as tools, but finds a different way of engaging with them. And it's all very abstract to me, but it kind of makes me want to go out there and try things out. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a couple of things there. I mean, first of all, there is the notion of constraint in creative practice. So, you know, the simplest of devices, that's the MS Paint example, which I think is fantastic to bring to a seminar like this. Doesn't, or because it is limited, it becomes sort of more accessible. I was talking to a friend of mine who dropped in on me this afternoon, in fact, about just this problem of how all of these tools, and especially I think Houdini, that I'll introduce today, and Blender as well, you know, they're on a path to ever increasing complexity, and the problem of the blank page just becomes a sort of more infinite space in which you kind of don't know where to gain any purchase. So I think that in itself is, yeah, the blank page as a kind of infinite void is a terrifying thing, I think. So I think that's it, you know, engaging with this with that in mind, I think is very much you know, I do wonder how those avant-garde movements like the Oulipo would approach some of these software environments. The workshop for potential literature and the workshop for potential painting that came out of the College of Pataphysics, which I'm sure Neil will spend some time talking about. So how you approach and how you, there's a thing, I mean, this is coming out of what you just talked about with Microsoft Paint and it being sort of more constrained, but the Oulipo, I'm trying to remember which one of them said it, but I can't, but it was the kind of artist as someone who is like the artists of the rats that design the cages from which they would like to escape. So I think that's a sort of connecting thread between Diogo's improvisational world and your infinite space of a blank page opening up hopefully through the workshop. But that's thanks for that. And your work was the diagramming. That was the philosophical diagramming. Was that the work you mentioned yesterday? Yeah, okay, that's good. I'm just trying to join a few threads up as we move through. So sorry, I think it's Jeremiah or Jeremiah, was it? I can't remember how badly.
Yeah, somewhere in between. Jeremiah.
I'm getting closer.
Yeah. Would it be possible if you could repeat the original question, please? Because
yeah, I mean, probably not, because like repeating something is always very difficult. But I'm interested in, I suppose, what you'd like to get out of the practical component of the workshop and what your experience of software has been so far. So I know a little bit more there.
Yeah. I just trying to keep an open mind to kind of get to know these new tools you're introducing for me. I mean, they are new. I mean, Blender is something I've did before, and I have used quite a lot of like Adobe software, like Photoshop, Illustrator, and all of that.
Yeah.
And some 3D modeling softwares before, mostly for like product design purposes, for like industrial design. So things like Rhino and SolidWorks and Fusion 360 is something I use. So basically more parametric type of modeling.
Parametric CAD system.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah. What I like from this parametric kind of systems is that you get usually you have a history of edits that you can easily come back. So for me, it's a bit like working with code, I guess. There's I wouldn't say easy, but there is a way to kind of go back a couple of steps and you know, change things and stuff. And
Yeah.
I do it. I also do a bit of coding with like creative coding with usually the P5 library.
Yeah.
So it's like it's same as processing, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. But the JavaScript version is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, and recently I kind of experimenting also with, you know, like vibe coding and trying to use some of these AI tools like Cursor for just fun and experimenting and trying to engage with software in a more kind of conversational way.
Okay.
But, yeah.
No, that's all very interesting. I mean, one of the things that I think to just I suppose begin to articulate for people that haven't used those sort of tree-like structures in relation to 3D work is that what was being described was a sort of non-destructive workflow where the chain of decisions or instructions are exposed and can be revisited in some kind of way, and in some software systems, and not all, where loops of decision making can be sort of wound back into that history, and where things can be prototyped and tested and iterated and automated. So one of the environments we'll be looking at today, it has got that kind of structure. So I'll be able to show you a little bit more about how that works as an interface. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Andre, maybe having coffee. Katrina.
Sorry, I have to go later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Katrina.
Hi. So softwares. I mean, for starters, I got really used to enjoying and exploring creation by hand and with physical materials. And then in architecture, when I had to move on to softwares, architectural drawing softwares, it was pretty scary because it's such a big environment with so much stuff. But at the end, I still figured something out. Even I still don't use 3D, I just do line works. But I still feel like I have the same process of what I do by hand and in a software that's using it as an extension of what I'm trying to do and just not following a path, but more like finding what something can do that maybe like software has that thing that drawing doesn't have as much. That's some things I cannot really predict how it's going to look or what's going to happen. In other softwares like Adobe ones, like InDesign or Photoshop, I do work with them. I just don't actually know what each thing does. I just experiment a lot based on whatever is going to happen, and I work with it based on what I do know. So my expectation, I think, would be aligned with that, just to see what happens when something I don't know is going to happen does, and then figuring what I want to do with that. Even if I have no experience with these softwares, but I'm interested in seeing how far I can take it.
Yeah, you're one of these students with a architecture background, or you're studying architecture at the moment?
I'm studying architecture.
So are there particular software environments that are being encouraged by the faculty?
Yeah, very much so. I only use ArchiCAD, but I know he has 3D, I just never explored the 3D, and I just do everything with line work.
Right.
And yeah, we don't have a lot more softwares that are exploring in faculty besides that one.
Okay, no, that's really helpful. Thank you. I think I didn't pronounce your name properly yesterday. I'm going to pronounce it badly again. Zhao Yang.
Yeah,
you-
it's correct, Zhao Yang, yeah.
Could you say it again just so that I can hear it?
Zhao Yang.
Okay, thank you.
Or just call me Zhao, yeah, easier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
For software, I explored Blender, but I always get like lost in Blender because they have a different view. I just feel lost. I feel dizzy. Use the mouse so you can easier room in, room out, and then just couldn't find where I should restart. I mean, when I see an object, I always find the reference point to see it, but in Blender, I just don't know the like 360-degree, and I don't know which level or which dimension I I I I am, and
Yeah.
yeah, I lost it myself. So yeah, just really struggling with Blender. I only can do the donuts because they have a video tutorial video on YouTube to teach you how to build up a donuts, but I couldn't to use the same method to build up other things in my imagination. And
Okay.
Photoshop's great. Yeah, I usually explore it. Recently, I quite familiar with some light software like Figma,
Mhm.
more like a 2D dimension and like diagram vibe. Yeah. So yeah, some coding. I'm more familiar about like database stuff, but yeah, about those graphic software, I'm not really
Okay.
good with it.
And
Yeah.
you are the critical code student, is that right? Graduate critical
Yeah,
code.
critical computing, more like theory and practice. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, good. Vertigo is a good way to describe that. So far we've had the sort of disorientation of a infinite blank canvas, and now the vertigo of not knowing how to orient yourself in those environments, which I think is not an unfamiliar feeling. Pradeep.
Hi,
Hi.
hi there. Apologies first, I didn't attend the session yesterday. I sort of got confused between days, I guess. I don't know. I mean,
Welcome to the seminar.
I was very excited to join it, simply because I didn't know what was about to happen.
Yeah.
I tried to wrap my head around what was about to happen, and I think I'm very curious about how theory engages with practice, to a certain extent.
Sorry, I missed that.
How theory engages with practice.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably a layer um, I was really excited about. And I saw some of Nick Spencer's drawings. And so that was very exciting. Coming to like the question at hand, with regards to the software knowledge I have primarily worked with 2D softwares, mostly Illustrator. I avoided learning Photoshop as much as I could, and managed my entire graphics and communication sort of bachelor's with Illustrator, InDesign, Figma, and everything vector.
Mm-hmm.
I work a lot I have developed a habit or sort of interest in working with typefaces a lot. And that is, let's say, something that I'm sort of more, I think, I don't know, how do you call it? That is something that I usually work with more. In terms of process, I don't think that I have any process per se. It depends on, the kind of work. I do a lot of, I've worked around exhibits. So large scale printing also comes at hand. So just mentioning that, and also printing books and from like, end to end conceptualization to have different scales.
Yeah.
So I've worked mostly around, graphics stuff. You could broadly categorize as that. Yeah.
Yeah. So graphic, your background is graphic design. Is this
Yes.
correct? Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, the idea of there being no process, I find very curious. What about wireframing and these sorts of early sort of sketch layouts? And is this a? I'm just trying to think about how a graphic designer sort of builds, this sort of framework within which, things start to congeal. Usually, is that unfamiliar as you
Yeah, I get, I mean, it usually depends on what is the brief that I'm sort of working with
yeah,
usually.
yeah,
What is
okay,
the kind of project that, even if it's a self-initiated project, what kind of, what fidelity of idea I usually have.
yeah,
So my process is usually dependent on that. So let's say if I have, I mean, if I have a certain idea of, how to go about, it usually varies on the basis of brief is what I would say.
okay.
Or at least even in self-initiated projects, what
Oh,
sort
yeah,
of quality of idea I have about what I want to make.
yes,
That's why I sort of mold my trajectory in accordance with that.
yeah. So, I mean, the brief that we've set, you'll be able to access the video recording. I imagine if it might even already be there. Is it to you? The presentation Neil gave yesterday. Have you been able to look at that? I mean, there's a kind of self-initiated brief.
Yeah,
Maybe we can have a discussion on the Discord channel. I can help you come up to date with that in some sort of way. But thanks very much. So the concern with type and motion design and graphic design, this is your territory. Yeah.
yeah, more or less.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We must nearly be there, are we? Swati.
Hi.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. For me, in terms of software, I think Rhino, Revit, I guess Photoshop, Illustrator for 2D stuff and post renderings. But like the automatic drawings that I mentioned in my introduction yesterday, I
Yes.
think they've been mostly just regular drafting tools, pen and paper.
Okay.
I haven't been able to kind of develop that kind of fluidity or fluid relationship with softwares. I think that affinity, I think, isn't um, as evident, I would say. So I'm
Okay.
hoping that this workshop will allow me to like uh, develop that fluidity from the body
Yeah.
to software, and I guess in
Yeah.
a way.
Okay. No, that's very helpful. The Rhino Revit combination is one that I kind of know and have taught, although I not a big I was going to say fan, but I don't think I'm a fan of any of the software. Really, it's the wrong term. I'm not an advocate in it.
Yeah, I mean, me neither. Rhino and Revit, I think, like just in architectural offices, that's like rule of thumb that most most
Yeah.
architects kind of have to know that to
I think
put together
that's
the project.
it's a very common denominator, isn't it, as a sort of pairing. The software that I'm going to talk about are, if anything, very marginal in mainstream architectural practice. I don't think that is necessarily necessary. I don't think that, but that's just the way architecture has become, and you know, as I said in the slides, I think you can see the workshop elements as a kind of countercurrent to those practices. Is there anybody that I've missed? It's easy to miss people in Zoom because of the way it presents the participants, but I think I've probably spoken to you all now. So I just want to show you two more quick images, and then we can get into the software side of things. So I just need to quickly share these again now. What am I sharing? Anything? What have I shared? So this is the
text and
is it this
and Unity Hub.
Ah, no, I've shared the wrong screen again. We'll call it a kind of age issue. It's actually, where is it? It's that one. What have you got now? You still got
The list of programs, and I think it's Max MSP or Pure Data.
it is Max MSP. Who said that? Who spotted what that was?
Me.
You actually missed me.
Well,
Well,
I will just.
I don't need to expand on my software skills if we're in time or not. I don't know.
It's never a waste of time, is it? But let's. This is really inspired by our critical code student participant. So this is. I'd forgotten that I wanted to frame this whole thing in the context of the practical work of not only the practical work of Alberti and the relation of optics to philosophy, but this is the ray tracer code produced by Friedrich Kittler, the media theoretician. So in framing the workshop, I reference the more commonly known engagement of Kittler with constructing a synthesizer as part of his teaching, but he also was known to teach media studies students, media theory students, how to program. Which I'd very much like to do, but I don't think we'll be able to do that in our 8 sessions. I can show you where this happens in the software that we're talking about, and I can show you some of the ways that you might approach that. But the time investment in actually learning all of this is not to be underestimated. But that's the first, let's say, inspiration of my own for wanting to run a course that's practical, but is engaged in philosophy and theory. The other is, of course, Simondon, who was also engaged practically in some of his teaching. A particular interest to me, although I've never really been able to spend enough time trying to figure out exactly what he did, or what's available to us to have a look at. But he constructed a television receiver, and you can see that kind of interest in this image. This image from the book that defines technics for us, I suppose. So this is the evolution of the electronic tube, which presumably figures in the construction of a television receiver. At least we'll take that as a placeholder image for that kind of practical concern of Kipler's. Ours is sort of larger in scale, and or the kind of practical element of consideration is larger in scale, that being the architectural. But I kind of think that the reflexive architectural idea today has got a very, as we've seen in that discussion about your own sort of software engagements, a sort of industrial double, and that's what is coming to be termed the digital twin. So the sets of software that we'll look at are those that can be used to construct those sort of digital twins of physical and operational infrastructures, and those same sets of technologies are where I want us to think about the systems that Neil was drawing in his earlier work and his research on cyberspace, rather than just thinking about the Meta's co-option of the metaverse and its capture of that term and its denigration. I would rather us think about this parallel, this sort of movement to the digital twin, as offering a set of interconnected software systems, electronic systems, and network systems that we can use to revisit the 7 continua of reflexive architecture. So I think I will ask you to say your small contribution on software wherever you've gone. You were there just a moment ago, Andre.
Yeah, here I am.
If you're prepared to.
Yeah. I might forget something. Well, I guess I started using computers with like 11 or something. And maybe I started at a weird point. I think my first experience with computers is like torrenting, like music, and discovering torrenting, and I guess it really quickly evolved towards a fascination that I could also make music with the computer. And then some cousin installed an early version of Ableton Live on a computer for me, a PC. And I was really I didn't understand anything. And I think I didn't even know about the concept of BPM, so beats per minute. So I just kind of like started to drag in instruments, and I couldn't really play them because I didn't know what a MIDI keyboard is. And I just like figured out how to like create sound somehow. And it was really, really fascinating because I think I misused DHW software, DAW software, digital audio station workstation software somehow. And I think it kind of like inspired a lot of somehow like realizing later how to properly use it. It really inspired a lot of frustrations I've had with that sort of like pre-configured methods that software often gives to you. With CAD software, because I think my favorite tool still is the paper and the pencil, or like whatever, like pens. And I think like the kind of expression that comes from intuitive, I mean, automation drawings were mentioned, right? Kind of surrealist methods. Also sculpting. I mean, it's not something that I do a lot, but I think there's so much power in it, the kind of way of translating a thought instantly on paper. And as soon as you start like working with a mouse and like with commands, you get very slow and you never really reach the kind of like directness that you can express on paper. And so recently I've been working much more with game engines and also like some web 3D stuff. I had a project last year, early this year actually, where we've kind of like tried to kind of write a custom shader code, and like, yeah, manipulating like 3D data. And yeah, I have the classic like kind of architecture CAD skills a bit. In the end, I still kind of use Vectorworks. And yeah, I'm really interested in misusing software still. And also like I'm in conversation a lot with people around me who are like developing like small bots and small apps, and I have like this kind of, they're architects actually, and people who kind of like try to work on different ways of like creating their own software. And it's a conversation I'm having somehow, and I think, yeah, I'm not afraid of like really going quite far into technical problems, but I think too much technical occupation can really limit the creative expression. And yeah, just today I had a client meeting, and that was really funny because he kind of asked me not to produce drawings or visuals. So I think sometimes it's also interesting how with very little you can achieve a lot. So yeah.
Okay.
Any questions? I don't know. Maybe sorry, I'm rambling. I don't know how long I was speaking.
No. It's always good to hear, particularly, I mean, the misuse of the idea of misuse of technologies itself is kind of
It's a
fascinating.
classic. Yeah. Sorry.
You know, why do we have to think about, misuse is to me like straight away positioning ourselves in some kind of relation to orthodoxy and the
Yeah.
I mean the industrial frames within which most of those tools are kind of given to us.
Yeah.
But so I think that is a really interesting way to think about the sets of technologies that we'll be talking about in relation to architecture, because almost everything that sits outside of the industrial production of architecture, it you know is a challenge to it, and I suppose is in that I suppose is somehow in relation to that idea of misuse. You know, it's like, is it a misuse of a game engine to bring it to architecture? Is it a misuse of you know, film production software to bring it to architecture? You know, what is being misused, architecture or the software? You know, so I think that's a sort of fascinating something that we can certainly spend some time developing and working with. That idea of custom shaders, is that within the game engine or outside of it in a DCC?
No, it was used with JavaScript web
Right.
3JS game engine.
Okay.
And like Gaussian splatting. So, and also I think it's a little bit of a cliche also, or no, not a cliche, it's the wrong word, but like the kind of it's a classical kind of artist methodology, you know? Like, do you kind of like set yourself apart as an artist, or like you make a position in the canon of art history somehow by like using the tools of today, misusing them, kind of like inspiring people who see your work, like, oh, he used like a screwdriver in the wrong way, it's now a sculpture, or like the kind of misuse of Namjoon Paik, like pointing the camera in the way, like creating the feedback loop with the screen. And I'm just wondering a bit if it's still adequate in a sense. Like, I guess it is. I don't want to like say it's not, but it's also been like around for a long time to me, I think, at least in the arts, like as a method to kind of like come up with your own methods, right? And I think it's still relevant, of course, in all kinds of creative endeavors to kind of come up with your own language, to really produce something new, especially now, like with the kind of pre-trained AI tool sets. I mean, like image generation. Now there's 3D generation. I'm using it a lot lately. It's really fascinating. And I mean, also sound generation is evolving really fast. And I'm wondering, like, if it's still adequate with these kind of like new libraries that we kind of like instantly can access, and yeah, what's the like? Because of course you can like use your own models, like you can like download smaller models and if you have like a good workstation, like you can kind of like train your own, like customize in a sense, like pre-trained AI models and use them and like come up with really your own kind of like kind of workstation, and I think that to me is very fascinating. Like, it sounds very fascinating, but it's also something, is kind of like a weaponization also happening right now of people in a political sense, kind of like creating their own kind of battleships. And I'm really wondering like where to position like oneself in that. I don't know if this is like very yeah, I'm not sure if this is very clear, but yeah, just like
I mean,
came to mind.
I think you've covered a lot of ground there, and I think, I don't know how people might have been following that, but you move very swiftly into the discussion about, you know, AI and, you know, the proliferation of repos and so on. So and that is the contemporary crisis condition within which the artist might reconfigure. You know, because I think all artists, certainly all the artists I've ever worked with seem to work best in conditions of crisis or challenge.
Yeah.
And I think again a sort of reference back to the critical code student on the program and Matthew Fuller, but the way you were articulating, you know, the difficulty of articulating an artist's methodology is something that I remember Matthew Fuller writing about in his short book Softness. So another of those references that aren't sort of references for the workshop, in which I think I don't know whether it's there, actually it might not be, but he describes the sort of comical situation where to talk about artistic methodologies you have to slap yourself around the face a couple of times to really be able to take it seriously, that there might be this idea of a methodology, because in some circles it's this idea of something that's kind of repeatable. And yet, of course, this is precisely the situation that we all find ourselves in, where artistic methodologies are kind of repeatable. And I think that's interesting. It's sort of a little bit outside of the main thrust of the kind of workshop, because I'm in a way already something of a kind of dinosaur in insisting that we look at compartmentalized, monolithic and large software systems at a time where the industries for which these have been curated, say, are sort of almost, if not being dismantled, are self-imploding because of the rise of the new ways of working. But we will hopefully get into some of that discussion with my colleague John O'Hare, who will talk about AI and RU code and integrations with VS Studio in one of the sessions. Right. If you don't mind, I'm just going to switch the camera off for a second and get a glass of water, and then I'll open up again with the software. I'll only be like 2 minutes, so it's not going to be a power cut. It will just be me switching the camera off momentarily. If that's okay. Bear with me just a second.
How's everyone?
We're good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was
How's
actually
Paris?
it's gray and
Cold.
and the school sucks, but it's okay. Like
Which school are you going to? Studying at?
so it's the La Villette, the public
Ah,
one of the public ones. Yeah.
which studio are you doing?
Now I'm doing one with like working on pre-existing stuff, like renovating and whatever.
Yeah.
I think we as like foreign
I think I know
students.
someone who's going to teach there or just taught there, but I have to look it up. Yeah.
Okay. Please
Before
do.
I mention. Yeah, it's funny.
No, it's yeah, but I think we didn't really get much of a choice. Like basically everyone else besides foreign students got prioritized in the courses they wanted to take. So like I ended up with this. But yeah.
Didn't you want to say something before I asked my question? I think you
Yeah,
were like, you said
I-
actually, and then you stopped, right? Then I
yeah, I
stopped you.
completely forgot.
Ah, okay, no worries.
Like and the other thing you mentioned, like the other course, the about the shading and whatever, like in which context was it? Like you said you were working on that in the beginning of the year.
Yeah. It was a project actually, it was interesting. It was a project that grew out of a workshop earlier this year, a film workshop, and we kind of started like misuse. I'm in here in the new center with a student called Ilinka Fekete, and she's an artist, and we kind of like really randomly run into each other in real life, and then we kind of started working together after this workshop as well, on a project that we are still kind of like trying to exhibit. And yeah, it's a long story. I don't want to like take time away.
It's okay.
Yeah, but it was
I think he's still grabbing water.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of an artwork in a sense, and yeah, I can send it to you if you want to see it.
Please, like, please, I'm really curious, actually.
Sure.
Right. Hello again. Sorry about that. Just reopening everything after everything crashed when the power went out. So just share this. How are we doing there? Can everyone see that?
See Houdini.
You can. Okay. So I thought it might be, I suppose, useful just to show something simple working in between 3 software environments. So Houdini wasn't originally going to be a part of this discussion, but I think it's useful to just get a sense of the integrations between something that is absolutely not straightforwardly designed as a architectural piece of software. There are very few architectural firms that you'll find using Houdini now. It's mostly I suppose it's mostly a procedural modeling and visual effects platform that's used in film and in games, but it starts really in film and in animation. It is one of the sort of family of systems, if we could use that expression, that has a non-destructive workflow, in that it exposes a kind of history. This is a pre cooked piece of work that I'll share with you as a set of files, so you can interrogate them in your own way and in your own time. And I'll also, if it would be helpful, provide a sort of screenshot version of how it was assembled, so that you could kind of follow it, for those of you that want a sort of rapid way into the way the software operates. This is, of course, our view into the world. This is the vertiginous space that somebody mentioned feeling when they enter piece of 3D software. It's a space that can be navigated. And this is actually prepared as a sort of container that can be exported into a games engine, and the games engine that I'll be using for the course will be Unity, by a kind of force of habit rather than any real sense that I would choose Unity over Unreal, the other sort of mainstream, let's say, competing platforms, or competing for dominance of this market. There are many other alternatives, but these seem to have gained a foothold in very different ways. So I'll talk a little bit about Unity when we get to it. So this is a sort of locked element at the moment, but I can unlock it and then get inside it to have a look at, well, to show you what I've done. And there are a series of switches that allow you to ignore parts of the work. So that's an operator that's downstream of the grid above it. You can select any of these and change the size, for example. And then we might make things a little bit bigger or zoom out a little bit more to see how that's impacted. And it's subdivided by rows and columns as a base grid. Sorry, I'll switch off the mountain underneath so you can see. So it's configured with many. You hit a kind of tab key to access a set of pre-cooked objects that operate on each other in a sort of chain, which is this flow diagram, sort of flow of operators, this one sending information to this one, and so on down the line. This is how the thing operates. And you can work with a particular scripting language, peculiar scripting language to this piece of software only. So a kind of its own internal language is not used or useful anywhere else. Say anywhere else, it comes out of another product, which I think I did list as something we would look at, which is Touch Designer, which is like a live 3D graphics, interaction, performance, video projection toolkit. So it comes out of this sort of shared lineage, and there are some similarities, some divergences. So this starts to create variables which become available, so you can customize the ways in which data is moved around, in very shorthand ways, very fast ways, and those values then become available to us as part of the tool set that the artist will be using. It's got its own sort of shorthand operators for this is declaring one of the components of a vertex, so a point on the grid, and we can look at the whole thing through a series of windows which are listed up here. This is a spreadsheet, so you wouldn't necessarily ordinarily think about accessing this kind of information about a three-dimensional model in this way, and in this Excel-like database presentation. But this third line of this bit of code starts to operate with an amplitude and frequency variable, you know, a value that we can change on every point on the grid, and runs through to produce a kind of sine wave. So it takes the flat plane of the grid and turns it into a sine wave. Before we get to that, the mountain operator takes the point values of the grid and does what the mountain operator does, which is shift the points around based on a sort of noise attribute. So an embedded algorithm based on, you know, different randomizing noise functions, and the whole thing is output as a three-dimensional object that can be imported into other animation tools. So as an ecosystem, there are sets of protocols that have been agreed between Side Effects, which is the company that developed this piece of software, and someone like Autodesk, who own the animation tool Maya, and they've agreed a kind of exchange arrangement whereby the three-dimensional model from Houdini can be straightforwardly imported with all of its attributes that might be changed by a 3D artist still available in a different software environment. So I'm interested in getting to understand the ways in which open standards, competing corporate entities can agree and establish a kind of ecosystem of relations between creative producers and licensed content, let's say, and ways in which tools like Blender, which we'll spend some time looking at in some detail in other seminars, which are founded on open licensing, fit within those otherwise corporate frameworks. So I think there's something quite interesting that's happening around about now in those things. I can see you all staring at the screens now as you have a look at software. I think, is that right? Is that what's happening right now? Have you all been able to open Have you all installed Houdini? I mean, I suppose that's the first question I should have asked.
Yes, I've got it here.
Yeah, there is a free version which comes with some limitations, but is certainly sufficient to kind of get you all started. I will share this file with you. So it's a relatively simple bit of work, and is here really and only really so that I can get it into Unity for you, a games engine. So I'll just somehow switch the scenes over. I just need to open up the next one and then switch. So I'll just stop sharing for now. And
sorry, I'm having a problem with Houdini. I don't know how to get the free like version of it.
did I? There's a link in the
Yeah, so I downloaded like from the website you sent. But then like, it doesn't says like I don't have a license or something, and
it can be quite a task to get the licenses to work. And I did wonder how much how to spend time taking people through that install process where you get kind of stuck. And I haven't really got an answer for that. And I suppose I don't want to impose on anyone's time outside of the seminar, but I could set up a small help session where we can arrange for you to share that screen and I can guide you through the process.
That would be great.
Yeah,
that would be amazing. Yeah.
So are you all going to be in the same position? It's one of the challenges of an online workshop like this, which is software based, is just getting people off the ground with the software. So what I'll do in the Discord channel, I'll have a think about when I can be available, and it will probably be at sometime early next week, I would think, to just run through that session where I can help you troubleshoot any of the installation problems with all the software I've listed. Yeah, so we can just do that. It might take a bit of time. So if you could have a go, and then we can see where you've got to with it. It should be. I mean, as all of these things, they should be straightforward. But I know from my own experience with Houdini, it can be a very, very tiresome process to get the server licenses up and running. Can I just quickly shift into showing you the file as it manifests in Unity, just so that you can get a sense of this this sort of communication between platforms that I want to get through today. So this is I just need to close that. I've now got 1,000 windows open, as you can imagine. Right. Okay, so we're now in Unity. It's a bit slow to respond at the moment, and I've got a bunch of error messages which I shouldn't really be having. So I'll try to ignore them for the moment, and hope that everything else is going to work. So this is a game engine or games production platform. It is it has a scene, a stage, if you like. It has a set of assets, a kind of cast of characters, and events that are brought to the stage, and in doing that you construct scenes, or if you're familiar with games terminology, the kind of games level. The only asset in here, other than the sort of basics of a camera, which gives us a viewpoint, you know, a light which allows us to see something, is the Houdini digital asset that I exported from Houdini and into here with that sort of mountain with its sine wave operator. So we can see that here, if it's working, which it might be. Yeah. If it's working, we can see that these are the frequency and amplitude values, the variables that were established in the Houdini environment, exposed for compositional purposes in the game engine. And if we've got anything running, which it might do, we'll see. I've also linked it to our a small Max MSP patch that sends values to those frequency and amplitude values. So I'll have to share that with you separately, but I'll figure out how to do that now. Just hang on a second. Try and bring the max patch in as well, which is not letting me do. Right. So just need to reshare. So this is our max patch, which is about as simple as you can get, but it's a series of, well, it's a pair of sliders that send values out to these variable names out on a network port, which is, you know, operating on this computer, the one I'm running at the moment, which the Houdini asset or a script that I've attached to this environment in here. We might get to see this. So this is the game engine uses a programming language called C#. You have to write a bit of C# to communicate with a plugin which is freely available, made by I guess somebody who's investing their own sort of labor in producing tools and systems for the community. So Unity's a commercial piece of software that's free to use up to a certain. I mean, they had some licensing controversy because they're a commercial entity with a relatively loyal user base, but with a licensing arrangement where publishing work over that return to certain income starts to incur different sort of licensing fees. So you've got this sort of mixed economy at work in these systems as well, where you've got your community members who are very active in making and sharing plugins and extensions, add-ons to the tools in ways that are comparable to the free and open source software communities and their sort of practices of sharing, but within these commercial constraints. And you've got, well, let me just see if I can get the damn thing to work. Then we'll be able to talk a little bit more, having seen it, but we'll see. So at the moment, I'm not getting, this is, this panel here should be receiving OSC values. So I'm just trying to work out why it's not. I've obviously broken something in my little crash today. Oh, maybe we've got it now. So it should be sending and receiving OSC, but it's not. It is. Sorry about this. I'll just figure out my own desktop arrangement in ways which allows you to see everything. So this is the max patch now sending those values over to Unity's OSC monitor, and we can see the mesh that we've imported from Houdini changing. There's a slight delay which you can vary the sort of refresh rate in the game engine. So I've set this up only to I suppose begin to illustrate the separate systems, the complexity of those systems, the range of and we've only touched the surface of the different environments that might relate to any one or several of them, but the principle of moving assets or entities from one environment to another, carrying some of the flexibility from one to another, and intercommunication over networks that can update and change those entities in some kind of way. And I'm using MaxMSP here for convenience. Later on in the program, we'll be working with a sort of a system that is much more geared to sensor data exchange between games environments or games engines and the Internet of Things, So I think we'll get to that at some point in the next. I think it's the next session where we start to do that a little bit more. Yeah, so that's actually all I wanted to do today, was to say here's Houdini. Here's an asset that we can get a 3D artist to work on. Here it is in Unity, in the games engine. Here are a couple of the scripting environments. This is using VS Code as the environment, which integrates with the games engine. So there's a lot of passing around of information and data, many different environments that you might work in. I've prepared, I think, three different Unity files for you. One will simply, and I'll put all of these onto the classroom site for you to open up and explore, but I will set up this extra session to get you all tooled up with everything installed, if that's what would make sense for everybody. Shall we aim to do that on Monday, do you think? Would Monday work for people? I'm not sure where I can't really impose any new additional time on you with the workshop. I think the new centre won't want me to do that, but I am willing to meet with people if they would like to get a bit of help installing software. Who would like to do that?
Or for me, it works.
Okay.
On Monday.
Okay.
Yeah, Monday is great. I'm gonna have to leave early today, so sorry. But thank you very much for the session.
Yeah, I think we've just about hit the the 2.5 hours, and as you can tell, I'm at the tail end of a 10-day flu bug or something, so I'm getting a bit dry in the throat and nasal. So yeah, so I'm relieved that I'm actually, I would say surprised, but relieved's probably a better phrase, that Max Patch actually survived that power cut, because it can be quite catastrophic, that sort of thing. So hopefully that's demonstrated, that we've got the Houdini environment, that's got its complexities. We've got a games engine that's got its complexities, and then we've got ways in which we can send data across a network that allows us to make some changes. And I think if we can get you to a point where you're able to do that within a short workshop program like the one we have, and use that to conceive of your own projects, we'll have achieved something together, I think. Are there any questions before we stop today? No?
I don't think so. Actually, I have kind of a question. Like the thing on Monday to work to figure out like the launcher and stuff. Like, would it be like absurd to ask like how to like again to do this transition between like all the softwares working at the same time? Because
I'm planning. I mean, this isn't the own. This was just the sort of introductory overview. I'm not going to sort of abandon you with at this point. The idea is that I'll show you how all of that works in a slower way, with an introduction to each of the environments in turn, as part of what we do.
Okay.
Is that Yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah, it's a
That's what I
different.
kind of.
No, it was just this is just the introductory session. It's it's not. We're not going to stop looking at this now, and it's going to be more help.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So how many? I mean, I'll just see if we can. I'll ask the new center how they want to manage the session to install software. Yeah. And then we'll put something in the Discord channel for everyone. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Anyone with vertigo? I definitely had vertigo when it looked like it wasn't working. But that's a constant challenge. No questions? Okay, so new center, it sounds like you could stop the recording now, and then we can figure out how to